Yep.
Okay. So I want to get into some of this pec minor stuff because, you know, every time we see somebody that rows and the shoulder clicks forward, or somebody that's pressing and as they come down their shoulder clicks forward, you know, we have to look at what's actually causing that. And usually it can be one of three things. It can be some sort of soft tissue limitation anteriorly, it can be a movement problem, or it can be a thoracic spine problem. If I'm too hunched over here, that shoulder blade's never going to be able to get back into the right position, so it's going to be tipped forward. If we get that extension back, then it can move the way it's supposed to. You know, usually some good coaching, and with our warm-up and the mobility work we do, the motor control, the pattern part, and the thoracic spine issues clear up pretty good. The pec minor stuff I want to go through now, there's a really easy assessment. So I'm having Matt kind of fake this here. He doesn't have that big of a problem, but this is what we'll see. If you look, you can see his shoulders raised off of the ground instead of down. So when you look at that, when the shoulder is anterior, there's pretty much three structures that could be doing that attach to the coracoid process of the scapula. You have the short head of your biceps brachii that attaches here. You have your coracobrachialis that comes through here, and then you have your pec minor on the third, fourth, and fifth ribs here that attach right in here. So in order to make sure that it is the pec minor, it's not those other two things, what we can have Matt do is just bend his elbow 90 degrees. Now if it's a biceps problem, because the biceps is also an elbow flexor, that muscle will be short, which would release the tension on the coracoid process of the scapula. You should see his shoulder lower. It didn't. To rule out the coracobrachialis, which is a shoulder or a glenohumeral flexor, we would just have Matt lift his elbow about 3 or 4 inches off the ground. You can see that his shoulder is still up. So if it was a coracobrachialis problem, when he flexes at the shoulder, again, that muscle would shorten. You would expect to see his shoulder blade kind of relax and fall closer down towards the ground. So what's left is the pec minor, and that's usually the case. We don't see a ton of people where it's a biceps problem or a coracobrachialis. More times than not, it's a pec minor problem. So one of the best ways to address that is, Matt, just sit up real quick. Go ahead and lie down on this. So what a lot of people do pec stretches usually, you know, what they'll do is they'll set up on a wall or something like that, and they'll use their arm as a driver for shoulder blade movement. But a lot of times what you'll get is a good stretch through here, but not a stretch to the pec minor. That's because the pec minor doesn't actually attach to the arm. It's just from the rib cage to the front of the shoulder blade of the scapula. So in order to get that muscle, we need to address the way that the scapula is moving on the rib cage. Pec minor is going to pull it forward, so we need to force it back and down. So what I'll have Matt do is put his hands here, and then I'm going to come underneath and actually use my hands to drive his shoulder blades back and down. And by holding this, you'll see that most people will feel kind of a deep stretch in this area. You can do it with a partner. You can also tell the person to actively think about pulling their shoulder blade back and down and pulling their elbows back. That's just going to add a little bit more of an active control component to the stretch, and make sure that, you know, they're stretching everything through the anterior shoulder compartment, because a lot of people are locked up here anyway just because we sit too much.